Hey everybody, it is Jordan here from Wednesday Night Warhammer. I've got 5 more Tyranid tactics tips for you to become a better Tyranid player. So, if you're interested in being maybe a better space bug, hang out while I go over these tips. Tip number 5 is the Genestealer Scout and how to ensure that your Genestealers are going to be safe no matter what. So what I do when I'm deploying my Genestealers, especially on this terrain layout, because it's very scary and open, what I do is when I'm deploying, I tell my opponent, if I go second, this is where I'll be scouting my Genestealers. And I actually kind of like fake deploy my Genestealers in a place where they're incredibly hidden. They're not going to be able to be touched at all, and they're off. So I deploy as if that's after my scout move. That might sound a little bit confusing, but basically I deploy where I'm going to put them if I end up going second, ensuring that they're able to move backwards behind cover. And then after I deploy that and my opponent and I agree that nothing will be able to shoot my beautiful Genestealers if they are situated in that spot, I would then move them up 8 essentially, to simulate the rest of the scout to be more in a forward position. So you can look at this on this diagram. The Broodlord to the left is simulating where I probably want my squad to be, so that it is incredibly hidden from any incoming fire or anything like that. And then the Genestealer on the right is probably where I actually end up placing them. Okay, and this is going to allow 2 things. The first thing, like I said before, I've pre-measured to make sure that an 8-inch scout backwards allows for that entire unit to be hidden behind cover, which is very important to triple check because a Genestealer brick is so many models and it is hard to hide. So make sure you're doing that, which is the whole reason behind this tip. And then the second thing is going to allow where if I go first, then I can just move 8 inches directly at my opponent's deployment zone and hopefully take something out if I want to. But this is kind of a tip that I've developed and I've started putting into play pretty recently, and it's allowed to really help me measure out and know where my Genestealers are going to be before the game, whether or not I'm going to go first or second, and allows for them to fight a little bit longer than if I'm just throwing them out there. Tip number 4 is all about Von Ryan's Leapers and any other infiltrating unit that you have in your army, which I always think you should have probably at least 3 if you are playing Tyranids for sure. So it's infiltrating screening. A lot of really good players use infiltrators to screen multiple different things before they even start the game. It is just incredibly powerful, important part of Warhammer 40k right now. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to set up the Von Ryans, like these larger ones that I've set up in the center of the board. And I've measured them, let's pretend. I've measured them exactly 9 inches away from my opponent's deployment zone. And this is thinking that I got to drop my units first. So what this is going to do is it's going to block out 9 inches from any of these 3 models for my opponent to put any other infiltrators out. They're not going to be able to put anything out within 9 of those, just because that's what infiltrating does. In addition, any units that want to scout, they're not going to be able to scout anywhere closer to my army. Okay, which is very, very useful. It allows for you to kind of create this defensive bubble with just 3 Von Ryans. In addition, just like I said, it's not going to allow for your opponent to scout anything. It is going to create a protection bubble for your Genestealers so that your opponent can't do that same trick to you. Meaning, because your Von Ryans are right there, then that means that they can't put any scouts or lictors or anything out in the center to prevent your Genestealers to scouting from where you want them to be. Very powerful and allows for you to control the board immediately, even while you are deploying. Then let's talk about if you don't have a redeploy first, and then we'll talk about the redeploy. if you go first and you want to keep your Von Ryans there, you can put them in a way where it's going to really force your opponent to come out and commit something to them in order to kill them, which will allow the rest of your army to counterattack and probably get a pretty good trade, because Von Ryan's Leapers are only 70 points, but they fight first and they're actually pretty durable for their points cost. So it definitely does allow for a pretty good trade. But if you're going first and you want to, you can just send 3 Von Ryans in your opponent's face and either move block them because they have a 10-inch move. You can be right up against enemy units, or if there's scouts or something that you think your Von Ryans are pretty confident in hurting or killing, do that. Take them out. They can absolutely be used for that as well. Now, something that I have been using with Von Ryans recently is Alien Cunning. I think it's actually a phenomenal enhancement if you are able to plan it out what you're going to do with your Alien Cunning. For me, with these Von Ryans, what I'm doing is I'm probably dropping them first there, right in the center, and they're going to screen out the other infiltrates, and they're going to deter some scouts as well. Then, throughout the rest of the deployment phase, I'm going to be thinking about where I would like to redeploy them, because we can now redeploy infiltrators out in the open. That was a while ago, but anyways, if I do end up deciding to redeploy my Von Ryans, because I'm not for sure going to go first or second before my redeploy happens, there's a couple of spots that I like to put them. You can see in the bottom right the smaller unit of Von Ryans, which is actually probably more accurate to what their size is on the battlefield. I'm going to put them right there and make sure that I'm cutting that angle so that nothing can really shoot at them unless they come all the way to that objective. And that's going to allow me a couple of things. First, if I end up going first, then I can send them up and they can do the things that I was talking about before, move block or do damage to a unit, or I can send them backwards and have them tow into that terrain behind that wall and touch that objective. So it's even harder for my opponent to reach them, which could set up for primary and even maybe possible secondaries. So plan out your infiltrators and your Von Ryans and take the redeploy enhancement. Tip number 3 is a rapid ingress for primary. This is a pretty neat trick that I've used to a good amount of success. You can check it out on our live show, actually. The most recent live stream that I did it was Tyranids versus Dark Angels. Check it out. I used this, I think, in the 3rd or 4th turn, and it worked pretty well for me. So the idea is we're going to, of course, move our normal colored gargoyles out. That's kind of the gargoyles that have already been out. They're move blocking a unit because they're so close to my opponent's deployment zone, and they're covering that objective totally. Now, in your opponent's movement, you can kind of judge how many different units are going to be able to activate into that gargoyle squad in the center. And oftentimes they'll talk to you about stuff. They'll be like, hey, okay, so I have line of sight on this and this, so these 2 units are probably going to activate into the gargoyles. Then, near their end of the movement, triple check what those weapon profiles are, triple check how many shots are going into the gargoyles, etc. And then if it seems like those profiles are just enough to kill one gargoyle squad, but not both, I would rapid ingress the second gargoyle squad on that objective, which is going to do a couple of things. The first thing, it's going to make your opponent think about, are they going to split fire to try and kill both squads? Because right now you're threatening to have primary, even if they kill one squad of gargoyles, or are they just going to commit to the front gargoyle squad and let you have that gargoyle unit right there? So even if they end up killing both, which really try your hardest to not let them do that, but even if they end up killing both, that's a bunch of guns and that's a bunch of weapons that are activating into your gargoyles instead of maybe your more important units like Genestealers, Lictors, Exocrines, etc. But I would probably encourage you to only do this if you are almost 100% sure that you're going to have at least one gargoyle model left on the point by the end of your opponent's shooting. It's a pretty neat trick. It's hard to pull off sometimes, but if you're able to, it can create a huge primary flip and definitely swing the scoreboard in a way that allows you to do better in the game. So think about rapid ingressing on an objective to ensure you have primary for the following turn, if it's possible. Tip number 2 is pre-measure and check Synapse. I think this is a pretty self-explanatory one, but I'm going to talk to you about why it is, of course, so important. And honestly, triple check to make sure if you actually need to be in Synapse, okay? So throughout your movement, make sure you are putting the units that are in Synapse that need to be in Synapse. And this is because there's excellent stratagem support with Synapse and multiple different detachments. There's a strength bonus with +1 strength in melee. Oftentimes just becomes +1 to wound in melee. If you really think about it, we have a lot of weapon profiles that additional pip of strength really allows for us, to wound one better. Like Hormagaunts going from 3s to 4s is an incredible breaking point. Genestealers going from 4s to 5s is also amazing. And then even like Tyranid warriors going from 5s to 6s, especially with Twin Linked. It's a really good bonus and buff to our Tyranid units, and make sure that you're able to put it out where you need it. And last for on like this part of the tip is battle shock. Are there any of your units that you feel your opponent is going to make them be battle shocked during their turn or in the ensuing turn if you are putting out Neuraloids? And because 3d6 battle shock is just incredible. You pretty much just don't fail it. Now I've played quite a bit of Tyranids, and so I've rolled quite a bit of Tyranid battle shocks. So yes, I have failed a good number of them. So it can happen. So don't think it's 100% sure that you're going to succeed your battle shock check, but it's pretty likely that you will. You got to plan out your movement and turn before Neuraloids. And this is also still something that I'm working on getting better about my Neuraloid placement. Understand where your army is going to move before you place your Neuraloids. Something that's really kind of annoying is when you end up moving and then and you've placed something with a Neuraloid to ensure it's in Synapse, and then you finish your movement and you realize that unit is right next to a Maleceptor. So it would not have needed it regardless. And you have to like flip it or whatever. So really kind of think about your movement and think about where things are going to lay at the end of your turn to then decide what's going to be in Synapse and what is not going to be in Synapse. Also, be wary of advances and charges and where they could finish. So if you are planning on your Genestealers aren't a good example anymore. If you're planning on your Hormagaunts to remain in Synapse throughout your opponent's turn, but you're going to charge them during your turn, understand that charge is going to go, at least 6 extra inches away from your Synapse unit. So either understand that they're probably not going to be within Synapse, and how much does that affect your gameplay, or readjust your Synapse units so that they're a little bit more forward to allow for those Hormagaunts or whatever to remain in Synapse. And last but certainly not least, triple check, does that unit really need to be in Synapse? Does the +1 strength or the stratagem support or the battle shock really matter? You can see in this example that I put here on the video, up on the top, I've decided my Lictor is deserving of the Neuraloid for sure, because their strength 7 going up to strength 8 is an incredible breaking point. So for sure the Lictor needs to be in Synapse. And then the bottom, the Tyranifex, I want that to be in Synapse too, because if I'm playing Invasion Fleet, then I want my Tyranifex to have a 5 on Feel No Pain. I'm kind of okay on the Exarchine not having it. Of course, you don't want your Exarchine to die, but in this scenario, I valued the Tyranifex over the Exarchine. Then last but not least, the Gargoyles, I could have given them Synapse, but I've weighed the Synapse buff to the Tyranifex for the possible Feel No Pain, or whatever stratagem you have in whatever detachment, and the Lictor for the +1 strength. So those 2 units I have kind of thought are more important in Synapse than Gargoyles, because the Gargoyles are probably going to die. Whoops, I gotcha. Sorry. Yep, it's the commercial of the video. Subscribe, that's the #1 tip to being a better Tyranid player. Subscribe to W&W. We're doing really cool list reviews every single week. And we have Wednesday night battle reports, of course, because of the name of the channel. We've had an incredible amount of success this year, and we're very happy and proud of all the support that the community, you guys, have given us, and we're very grateful. So if you would consider subscribing, do it. Come watch us. All right, now for real. Tip number 1. Okay, tip number 1. I've talked a lot about on this channel how tyrannids, you kind of want to be able to just activate into 1 or 2 things per turn, because tyrannids are really good at killing one thing because they all stack their shooting buffs together, and it can absolutely decimate something. And even combat too, we don't have a whole bunch of, the warrior detachment, you can kind of spread out way more. But anyways, we don't always have a whole bunch of units to go out and kill. We have a whole bunch of units to go out and score. So we need to make sure that all of our killing units are able to activate in a way that benefits us and clears out the things that we want to clear. So this tip is all about forcing your opponent to give you 1 unit a turn, or kind of forcing your opponent to make, I don't want to say bad decisions, but decisions that are less to their advantage than they are to yours, in order to allow for your units to activate in a way that is just going to take out whatever they've put in the center. So the first thing is move block, and I've talked about that a lot on this channel. If you are move blocking a melee unit from being able to charge your units that you think are very important, then essentially for a turn you have killed that unit. That makes sense. Because if that unit is not able to do its primary function, its main thing that it wants to do, then it might as well not be on the table, right? So if you're able to move block and stopping those units from activating, then that can really allow for you to, take care of that unit another turn and not this turn. Triple check and measure threat ranges. If you don't want one of your units to be in a line of sight of one of your opponent's units, so you don't want to allow that unit to activate either, then just put it just outside of their threat range for a charge or for shooting. Make sure that you're adjusting for any advance and charge, of course, as well as advance and shoot. And then force primary, secondary questions. Make your opponent come out and deal with a unit in order to deny you points. In our most recent live stream game, during my first turn, I put a lictor out for sabotage. That was pretty hard to get to, but I knew that my opponent, Zach, at the time, would have the opportunity to send a strong charge at it if he wanted to. And once he did that, the rest of my army was able to jump on that unit and then clear it out. And basically, I traded a lictor for 5 terminators and a captain. So something like that really allows for you to be on the better end of the trade. In addition, when you're talking things through, you can make the opponent aware of the crackback if they expose too many units. So you can set up like your exocrine and tyrant effects, how I've done at the bottom, and tell your opponent, okay, you probably can't see them, but I'm just measuring to make sure that when they come out next turn, they can see all of these lines of sight, which you can see that exocrine at the bottom. If he steps up just a little bit, he pretty much sees almost the entire board. Saying something like that, and don't be disingenuous or deceptive or anything, but just let your opponent know that those lines of sight, that's what you're planning to set up for the next turn. And then certainly last but not least, always set up for a stronger second punch. Allow for these initial trades to start, and then kind of allow for your opponent to send something out for you to then counterpunch and send even more out to deal with whatever your opponent has out. If you're able to kind of control the battlefield by doing these tips, is really going to allow for your Tyranid army to activate in a way where you're going to be on the upside of every single trade in the entire game. And in my opinion, Warhammer 40k right now is all about trading and kind of deciding which units you can afford to a trade, and kind of trying to figuring out where your opponent's going to put their units and allow you to always be on the upside of those trades. All right, everybody, that's the video for this week. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Comment, like, subscribe, stay cool, and I'll see you Wednesday. Bye.